Your feet hit solid ground and it feels wrong. After months at sea, the earth seems to rock beneath you, even though it's not moving at all. Everyone assumes the hardest part was the flood itself. It wasn't. The hardest part was what came after. But, because for the first time in your life, the world is empty. No neighbors. No cities. No roads worn smooth by other feet. Just mud, silence, and a horizon with nothing on it. You step off the ark into a landscape stripped bare. The water has receded, but it left behind a thick layer of silt covering everything, a gray-brown blanket over what used to be fields and forests. The smell hits you first. Wet earth, rotting vegetation, and something else underneath it, something you try not to think about. Your first job isn't building. It's burying. Animals that didn't make it. Evidence of what the world looked like before. This is grim work, but it has to be done before anything else can begin. Then comes the search for water that won't make you sick, dry wood that will actually burn, and ground solid enough to walk on without sinking to your ankles. Every step is a test. Every patch of land has to be proven safe before you trust it. Here's the piece of the system nobody talks about. Rebuilding isn't dramatic. It's repetitive. You wake up, you assess what changed overnight, you fix what broke, and you go to sleep exhausted. This becomes the rhythm of your entire life now. Every single day, the same questions. Is the shelter holding? Are the animals calm? Is anyone sick? You'd think the animals would be the hardest part. They weren't. After months confined together, most of them just wanted to scatter, to put distance between themselves and every other living thing. Predator and prey alike moved off in the same directions, too exhausted to be afraid of each other yet. The real difficulty wasn't keeping them from fighting. It was making sure enough of them stayed close enough to survive the first season. So you build fences. Not to imprison anything, but because a fence means something belongs somewhere. A fence is the first sign that this patch of mud might become a home. Historians who study early agricultural settlements point to enclosures like this as some of the earliest evidence of organized land use, long before written records existed. Weeks pass. The silt dries and cracks into a mosaic of gray plates that crunch under your feet. Beneath it you start to find things. A patch of soil dark enough to grow something. A spring that didn't dry up. A stand of trees that survived because they were on a hillside. Every discovery becomes a landmark. You name things now. Not because you're claiming the world, but because you need to be able to tell someone else where the good water is, or where the ground gives way. Naming is how memory becomes shareable. It's how one person's hard-won knowledge becomes everyone's. A rule everyone in this life learns quickly. Nothing is wasted. Not wood, not cloth, not the parts of an animal that died of natural causes. Scarcity isn't a temporary inconvenience. It's the new baseline. You'd think this would make people hoard, grip tightly to whatever they have. Mostly it didn't. When everything is scarce, sharing becomes less of a virtue and more of a survival math problem. One person hoarding grain doesn't help if everyone else starves and there's no one left to help rebuild. Planting becomes an act of faith you didn't know you needed. You put seeds into ground that, weeks ago, was underwater. You have no proof the soil will hold nutrients. No proof the rain pattern will be the same as before. No proof of anything, really, except that the alternative is starving slowly while waiting for certainty that will never come. So you plant. And you wait. And the waiting is its own kind of work, because waiting without doing anything else feels unbearable. So you keep building. Shelters get sturdier. Walls go from temporary lean-tos to structures meant to last through a winter, then 2 winters, then indefinitely. Here's the skeptic's turn. You'd expect constant danger. Wild animals. Desperate people fighting over resources. That's how it's always depicted. Mostly it wasn't like that. For a long stretch, you were one of very few people, maybe the only people, for a vast distance in any direction. The danger wasn't other humans. The danger was loneliness, and the slow erosion of routine, and the question that creeps in during quiet moments. What if this is permanent? What if this empty world is just what the world is now? That question is heavier than any flood. But then, the smaller things start to anchor you. A crop survives its first frost. An animal gives birth, and the offspring is healthy. Someone laughs at something, really laughs, for the first time in longer than anyone can remember. These moments don't fix anything. But they prove the world still works the way it used to. Cause and effect. Effort and reward. The basic mechanics of being alive, still running underneath everything. A second rule of this life, every skill you have becomes essential, and every skill you don't have becomes a project. If you knew how to make rope before, you're now the rope person. If nobody knows how to preserve meat properly, someone has to figure it out, through trial and a lot of error. Specialization, the thing that lets large societies function, has to be rebuilt from zero. At first, everyone does everything. Slowly, people drift toward what they're good at, and that drift is the beginning of a society again. Season cycle. The first full year ends with a harvest that's smaller than anyone hoped, but real. Real enough to plan a second planting. Real enough to set some seed aside instead of eating it all. That decision, eating less now so there's more later, is one of the oldest acts of trust in human history. It assumes there will be a later. It assumes the world keeps going. And it does keep going. More structures rise. Paths form between them, not because anyone planned roads, but because walking the same route enough times wears a trail into the ground. Trails become paths. Paths become the bones of a settlement. None of this is glamorous. None of it happens fast. But it happens. Here's the reframe. You spent the early days thinking the flood was the event. The thing that happened. But the flood was just the ending of something. What you're living through now, the slow, unglamorous, repetitive work of turning empty mud into a place where people can live, that's the actual story. That's what gets remembered, even if it never gets told the dramatic way.